Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning panel. I hope everyone is still alive after a big day yesterday at Milken. My name is Caroline Fairchild. I'm a managing editor on LinkedIn's global editorial team. We make sure that there's great news and information in your feed. There's actually a great conversation going on LinkedIn right now about this very conference, which you can follow using hashtag #MIGlobal. My assumption is that most of the people in this room have heard some doom and gloom statistics about the future of work. One of them is by 2030, over a third of the global workforce will have to change jobs. Another is that during that same time period, nearly 800 million workers could be displaced entirely by automation. Media loves to make hay of these statistics, but the reality behind them are a little bit more nuanced, and that's what we are here to talk about today. I have a great group of panelists, and to introduce them briefly, we have Dave McKay. He's the president and CEO of RBC. Mike McNamara is the CEO of Flex. Igor Tulchinsky, is the founder, chairman, and CEO of WorldQuant, and Jeff Wong is the global chief innovation officer at EY. There are a lot of directions that we could take this conversation, but to start, I thought it would be fun to ask the panelists to, in one sentence, and one sentence only, explain what they think the biggest misconception is about the future of work. And I'm going to put Jeff on the spot to kick us off.
Great, thank you, and thank you for having me, Caroline. I think contrary to popular belief, automation, artificial intelligence, the technologies that are impacting the workforce, at least for us, isn't just about revenues and profits, although that they do impact those things. It's really for us about making our people superheroes. Right? How do you make them better, faster, stronger? And the fact of the matter is, our people love it, and they want it, and they would demand it from us if we didn't give it to them.
That wasn't one sentence, but we'll let it slide.
Sorry.
Okay, gotta keep everyone honest.
Okay, I'll try to do one sentence. Automation creates jobs in the following manner, that automation makes companies more efficient, companies make more money means more hiring. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
I would say it's just the reverse of doom and gloom in that it's actually trying to find people to do the jobs is actually more challenging today, and you actually need automation in order to enable that to occur.
I would say in the current construct, there's not a lot of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of human intelligence right now. We're in a data evolution. We're in a software revolution. Machines aren't learning a lot themselves. We're teaching them. So I think the evolution is very much training machines. They will start to learn in the future, but they're not doing a lot of self-learning right now.
Yeah, and Dave, let's talk a little bit more about that evolution. We were just discussing that we're about to approach the 50th anniversary of the automated teller machine, which was supposed to displace all bank workers, but clearly people still work in banks. How many people does RBC employ?
We have 80,000 around the world.
Okay, it's a few people.
So, still incredibly important, and will be in the future.
So tell us what you're seeing in banking right now with technology. How is it disrupting work on a day-to-day basis for your employees?
There's enormous opportunity on the productivity side. I think, as you look at our back office operations and doing it more seamlessly, more efficiently, lower error rates, and moving our employees to higher value-added customer interactions, making our frontline more productive. We live in a complex world, multi-product world with lots of regulation. It's tough to keep our frontline employees up to speed with all the changes. So certainly software-enabled, AI-enabled tools to make our sales force more effective and more capable is an incredible area. The most disruptive part for us is the social media platforms and the enormous amount of data and insight that you do when you type into the Google search bar, the Amazon search bar, your Facebook page. Those signals about what's going on in your life are being read by potential providers around the world. And that's very different than the last 150 years of our existence, when largely you came into the branch, came onto the contact centers and told us what's going on in your life, and we had kind of sole access to that. We competed as an industry with close branches in proximity. We competed on people, we competed on brand, but very much in a very traditional way with access to what's going on in the customer's life. Now, those social media platforms see all the cues, and they can broker those cues, they can meet those needs themselves, and we worry about that. So a lot of the strategy that we're building at RBC is to really build our own platforms with our own insights to make sure that we have a relevancy to a customer going forward.
I was telling Dave that I had to go into a bank over the summer, and it was such a foreign experience to be in a physical bank. So I feel like people just don't do that anymore. Mike, Flex employs more than 200,000 employees, 100 countries, 30 countries, 100 facilities. What are you seeing? A lot of those workers are on assembly lines, which people are saying those jobs are going to go away. It's all going to be tech. What are you seeing within your warehouses?
Well, it's like you said, we have a really big footprint, and what's interesting about our footprint is we also have it spread out in many different industries. So medical products, automotive products, telecom, datacom, IoT, I mean, virtually every device. So we get a real cross-section of learning as to what are the trends of manufacturing really across many different industries. And, you know, our objective is to put as much automation in as makes sense. I mean, people don't like to do remote, repetitive jobs. The more repetitive jobs they do, the less interested they are. The more repetitive it is, the lower the wage. The lower the wage, the more repetitive it is, the less engaged they are, the more unhappy they are as employees, and you know, they're not happy, we're not happy, and so our objective is to do as much automation as makes sense. We've never been able to have our automation actually keep up with the demand for more jobs, and sometimes maybe the simplest example is like a cell phone. 5 years ago, these things had like 800 parts on them, and now they have 3,000 parts on them. So you actually can't get there with people. You just can't hire another 100 million people because the next version, or 100,000 people, just because the next version of the cell phone is more complicated. And by the way, when it made more complicated, it's still the same form factor. You got to hit 3,000 parts instead of 600. You actually have to have automation in order to make it work. So I'd almost say you can't actually get there without automation. So the employees like it. It's almost necessary for the work to be done. But we can't keep up enough automation ideas and implementations and have the ROIs to offset any degradation in our workforce. I mean, our workforce still continues to expand.
All right, so employees like technology for the most part. They're not fearful of it. Jeff, I don't have to tell you that audit and tax workers are usually pretty high on those lists of jobs that are going away in the future. Talk to us about that and what you're seeing at EY.
So you're absolutely right. If you look at any list out there, you know, audit and tax, which are our two largest businesses, are in the top 5, usually the top 3 of these are the industries that are going away. These are the jobs that are going away. And you know what's really interesting is I think all of those studies believe that we're a static organization or we're a static industry, that audit is one thing and it's a set of tasks and you do those tasks, and if you automate those tasks, it goes away. And we certainly don't see ourselves that way. We're continuously evolving ourselves as a firm, but even within those specific industries, we're evolving. We're entering new businesses. We're considering how do we understand fraud detection at scale. There's a lot of data involved with what we do on a day-to-day basis. We're asking how can we use that in better or more interesting ways. So while we're on this top of every list, the fact is I would agree that there's a lot of automation that's going to happen in our industry. In fact, we ourselves automated 2.1 million hours of worker time last year. We implemented 2,000 bots on behalf of ourselves and clients. Just under half of that was for ourselves. It's going to change because we're driving that change. So we plan on being the ones that lead the transformation of our industry into new businesses and into better ways of doing things. And as I think we've heard on the panel, frankly, if we didn't do it, our people wouldn't want to be there, right? This is something they want from us. They love it when we come. Funny story, in the first bot that we implemented, we were watching it pretty closely to see if this cultural implication of are they going to fear it? Is this going to be a problem? How are they going to feel about it? And we took out a significant percentage of hours. They loved it so much, they held a naming competition to name the bot. They made it part of their team, right? They thought, this is a team member helping us do better. That's what we're seeing on the ground in reality.
And I definitely want to get to that. But Igor, all these leaders are basically making predictions about what their future business is going to look like. And that's, you know, the business that WorldQuant is in, is predictive analytics. Are we getting better at being able to predict the future, or is it just getting harder as technology advances?
Well, we're getting better at predicting the future in one way, and in a sense that for any particular thing you want to predict, for example, the weather, there's more and more data available for this, and the more data is available, the better prediction you can make. So any single thing is becoming more predictable. Going in the opposite direction, the world is becoming more complex, more interconnected, more sped up, and that is creating a more confusing effect. So the interplay of these two factors basically mean that if you don't have good predictive tools and predictive analytics, you will just not be able to make sense of the world in a certain number of years. And the next generations of leaders that are raised have got to be able to use these tools to navigate the company through this landscape.
So we're getting better at predicting things. Automation is not as scary as we think, and it's probably not going to replace as many workers as we think. But I think we can all agree that the jobs of the future will require higher skills. As we are automating routine tasks and things like that, the jobs of the future will require more education or more skills, I should say. Mike, talk to us about how you're thinking about that in terms of making sure that your workforce is prepared.
Yeah, without doubt, the jobs, I don't know if there's any less. I think there's structural reasons that there's going to be more jobs just because, there's the aging population in the developed countries, which is going to create more need for services. There's hundreds of millions of people coming into the middle class in China and India on a continuous basis that are going to consume services. The most important thing for us as we think about it is, jobs are just going to be different. And it's not going to be less of them, they're just going to have to be reconfigured. And people like to have their jobs reconfigured. People actually work as hard as they can to figure out how to go automate their jobs. Because, I use this simple example of, well, you can keep jobs around if you don't let anybody use a tractor and you let them use a shovel. Why don't you just let them use a shovel? I mean, why give them a tractor if it's going to eliminate jobs? And by the way, why did you even give them a shovel? They could, if you take it to an extreme, it's like, of course, everybody wants automation. So these are all things that they're just going to be different. We put about 2 million training hours a year into our workforce because we have a very large workforce. We tend to have a workforce that's transient because a lot of times the manufacturing is the first job as they come out of, at least in developing countries, they come out of the regions. And we have to train them more. We don't open a facility up almost ever, even in the United States, without going to the local community colleges and talk about these are the kind of skills we need, and we actually help them craft jobs that are right for us. So it just needs to be a different kind of job. It doesn't mean, and hopefully the different job is going to be less repetitive because it's more automated. It's going to be less routine. So as a result, it's going to be higher paying, but it's going to need new skills. And working, to me, businesses retraining their people, working with the local community colleges, who I think are effective feeders into a local system, are almost necessary requirements. But we also have to have the colleges and those, even when the industry is not pushing them, to recognize the needs of industry and make those changes even on their own.
And Mike, what's going on over at RBC? Is Canada thinking about these issues any differently than we are here in the States?
Well, I think there's a lot of similarities. I might disagree with some of the comments around this.
I love that.
This is not a threat, and people are absolutely okay with this, and everything's going to be rosy. I mean, you look at the rise of populism. In America, the rise of populism. In Europe, the rise of populism. In Canada, and we're seeing that manifest itself in real time. It's the uncertainty of the future, and the lack of opportunity for too many kind of middle-class skills. And therefore, we've gone through these disruptions before, electricity and the cars, and you get to a better place. But the journey isn't always smooth. The journey can be really bumpy, depressions and uprising. And therefore, how we take this journey is really, really important, and how we retrain. So, certainly in Canada, we've really led the way. We just produced a report called Humans Wanted, and we did research into the skills transition that we see that our country is taking. And we feel that at a minimum, 25% of the jobs in Canada will be significantly disrupted, and upwards of 50% will be materially disrupted in the skills that they have to do that job. So how do you take your population, that large percent of the population, and maintain social stability and get to this better place that I agree, the place is better, higher productivity, less error rates, safer transportation, better education, better medicine. But how do you take that journey? Lifelong learning is one of the ways that we're thinking about it as an organization. We're not going to be able to honestly retrain every one of our employees. I think we're going to have to help get them ready to participate in other sectors, to participate in other jobs. So, rather than just looking at severance, you look at putting money into a pool for them to go back to school, to learn new skills, to bridge that gap. Certainly we're looking at retraining as many employees as we can, and we're looking at the aptitudes, and we're looking at the skills of the future, and we're trying to program them. I think you want to get to the skills of the future, so I won't jump in there. But certainly, my view is this could be a bumpy ride. There's a lot of work to do. I see it in the anxiety in some of our frontline employees. I mean, people have been tellers. We have 10,000 tellers. Those jobs are now down to 4,000. When we talk to them about the future of self-serve, our number one channel is digital, mobile, iOS, Android. So that evolution impacts, there's anxiety about the future. Can I afford my mortgage? So it's real, it's palpable, and I think this journey is going to be difficult.
Yeah, I think it'll be challenging as well. Talk to us a little bit about the skills of the future, Jeff. What are you guys working on at EY?
So actually, it's true that the journey is going to be bumpy along the way. So I actually would agree with that. So what are we doing at EY about it? I think we're actually looking at our talent question pretty systematically. We spend $500 million a year on learning and development and training. And historically, we had thought about it as skill development. You got to get these skills to get the next level, tax level 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're talking about skills are still important. We still do that. All the tax forms need to be filled out correctly. But what we also do is think about how do we help our people deal with complex environments and uncertainty, and how do we think about that systematically in that $500 million we spend in learning and development. We're doing a series of other things as well, though. At the leadership level, I think most people in this room have taken the corporate leadership training programs at the business schools, named business schools around the world. We have that as well. We started one this last year at Stanford, which is where I went, with the School of Engineering and School of Design as a central focus area around, again, complex decision-making, technology, and how the world's changing so quickly. And also with the business school, trying to combine that. We have in a badges program. Think of it as a minor that you would get in college, a series of skills that you show the firm that you have, and that allows you to get a badge that's accredited by external service provider that allows you to carry the fact that you are a data level 3 person and badged by EY and carry that to different areas of the world. We're talking to the deans of universities about how their programs in the business school and elsewhere need to be different, need more data analytic capable, more technology proficient. We're looking at how we're recruiting. We're looking at we're paying far closer attention than we ever have to how are we doing against the STEM team, the STEM schools, the STEM areas of the university recruit at, because we know in the business schools we're typically 1, 2, or 3, right? And so these are just a few of the things we're doing to systematically look at how do we think about our people differently, how do we train them differently, how do we ask them to lead differently. I think I see Nancy Altabello in the audience out there. If you have so I'm a bit stealing what she's been doing for our organization. So if you have questions about how we run talent, there are examples well beyond this. You talk to her, talk to me. The last thing I'll say is even not thinking about our own employees, but how we approach people in general. As we all know, the gig economy has become a really big theme, like Uber drivers, Lyft drivers around the world. We started something called Gig Now, which is for people who have significant degrees, significant training, experts maybe in supply chain or auditors or tax folks who want to attach to our firm in a different way. And the platform in its first 12 months is doing extraordinarily well. And that's about how do we allow somebody who wants to build their career differently than has been built in the past, be a part of the EY ecosystem.
And Igor, what I hear a lot from business leaders is that the training programs, education systems, they're not keeping up with the rate of change that's happening in their businesses in terms of the skills that their workers need. Can predictive analytics help us with that? Are we getting better at figuring out what the skills of the future are going to be?
Well, the skills of the future keep evolving, and you can't really predict the future too many steps ahead. But what can be done to make the process better is to have better knowledge networks within the company. For example, our company is it's like the company of the future. It's built around change. It's built around artificial intelligence. And so when these so-called disruptions happen to us, they just add more jobs. And I think companies have to adapt and change into a new form and a new way of doing things, and then everything will happen naturally and smoothly.
Great.
But I think part of, too, is, there has to be some individual responsibility to recognize that the world is changing. A lot of discussions built around, what are business going to do to retrain the people? What are, governments going to do? But a lot of it has to do with people looking at the world and saying, what do I want to be and who do I want to be to grow up? I don't think anybody is sitting around the dinner table talking to their 10-year-old about being a truck driver, how that's, and I don't think that in particular creates, if there's an opportunity to get somebody off from like driving down the road for 10 hours a day and doing it every single day over and over and over again, if we think that's like value added to society, it's actually not. If there's a way to improve on that, that would be good, and then you can actually release more of the intellectual capacity of the world. But I think there's a fundamental shift. The world is changing. Technology is allowing that world to change at a more rapid rate than ever before. It's creating new opportunities, new technologies, and new investment opportunities and new opportunities for people. And I think people have to just understand as they're going through their life and moving up at the beginning, they're just going to need to be more adaptive and more agile, which is, by the way, exactly the same challenge every business has in the world today. If you're not continuously adapting and changing and embracing technology, the changes that are going on in the marketplace, reading those changes, and then adapting to them, if you don't have a culture of agility within your company to adapt to these changes, you're not going to be successful. And I can almost extend that same logic right into people. It's like people have to recognize they're going to have to be more agile in terms of location and what they do. But a lot of the responsibility, I think, comes back to the core people.
Mm-hmm.
But the opportunities out there, we've been talking about automation taking everybody's jobs now for like 5 years, and all I see is the unemployment rate going down. And being a big hirer of people, I find the biggest challenges is finding people. And it doesn't matter if it's engineers or actually direct labor working on a line. It's a huge challenge everywhere in the world that we go.
Mm-hmm.
Harold, you asked actually an interesting question about education, just building off of this, because I have twin 12-year-olds, so I've had that conversation about, how do you train somebody, or, my daughters, how do you train my daughters for a job that doesn't exist yet, using a technology that hasn't been invented yet against a problem we don't know yet, right? That's the world they're going to live in.
Yeah.
That's going to change multiple times within their career lifetime. And so, we talk about it, and that's just, we talk about it as a firm too. How do you deal with how do you train people to deal with complex environments where things are uncertain, and then give them the grit and perseverance to be able to see that through to the end, and then do that over and over and over, right? And so that's a lot of the things we're thinking about in our training, but also in how we screen. We're asking, how do we find that, against a resume or against a background? It's a very important question, I think, for us.
And when you say that these traits are pretty uncommon, these are things that really the highest of the highest skilled workers have. So if this is something that whether you are a frontline worker or you're, the chief innovation officer at EY, you're going to have this adaptive, always changing grit about work. I mean, is this really realistic that everyone's going to be like this moving forward in terms of being able to sustain this environment?
It's a good question. Since you were looking at me, I'll hit on it real quickly, which is, in my broader extended family, I actually have people who you would consider in sort of the more blue collar, more hands-on part of their job. It always surprises me because I think you would agree, the general perception in rooms like this is, look, we have the skills, everyone in this room, we find all of our kids will be fine. And it's a problem somewhere else. I can't tell you how much grit and determination they have. Frankly, a lot more than I've seen in some rooms like this, because they have to fight every day to make it work, right? They fight every day for their families, and how adaptable they are, how entrepreneurial they are in terms of changing and trying to shift and adapt and understanding where the market. They tangibly feel it. Like we talk about the economy moving, et cetera, I think everyone here does okay when the economy moves. They feel it on the ground with jobs, friends losing jobs, et cetera. And so I think that there's a lot more grit and determination in America, because I'm American.
And I
think
think
the
the
way
other
we
thing
solve
is-
it, though, is one, I mentioned lifelong learning, but also work integrated learning. So you can't expect to deliver all this knowledge up front in our traditional undergraduate college education system. And I had a conversation in Europe recently with one of the leading schools there, and they've decided to try to deliver a 4-year undergrad, 2 years up front, and then 2 years over the next 10 years. You pay all 4 years up front, so you can maintain the infrastructure and the professors, but you tailor the last 2 years of your education depending on where your interests lie and where you think the jobs are. But we have to build this flexible, lifelong learning educational ability, because we can't predict up front where the needs and skills are going to be, and you have to adjust, and we have to build that flexibility into our curriculums. The second, and we fundamentally believe that in this at RBC, and I'm co-chairing a panel of university presidents and my peers in Canada to create work-integrated learning opportunities, so internships, apprenticeships for 100% of undergrads in Canada. We think it's so important that we get kids into the workforce, they find out what careers look like, because I agree with you, Mike, I don't think you can sit there and say, I want a banking career, I want to be in the legal profession, I want to be in the healthcare profession, and build the traditional career from the bottom to the top if you perform well that we have over the last 50 years. I think you're going to have skills that cross horizontally across many professions, and you got to build those skills, and we have to build the educational programs, get youth into the workforce. We really think part of driving a GDP outperformance is, Canada's outperformed the G7 consistently now over the last decade. One, more inclusive workforce for women, more inclusive workforce for immigrants, and we think the next leg is more inclusive workforce for young people in our society. We have to engage youth in our economy right now, and they are at risk of being left behind in this transition. So we're really focused on getting youth ready for the future of work, in addition to worrying about our 80,000 employees and how they're deployed. So it's a multi-dimensional problem, but work-integrated learning, we think, is one of the keys.
And Mike, how common would you say this grit and determination is amongst your 200,000 employees? Are you worried about them, or you wrestle at night thinking about this?
So I think, first of all, you don't need to have everybody to be shucking and jiving of the world and how it's going to work, and I got to be really adaptive because not everybody can do it. It's just that we need a lot more to be able to do it, and that's when training comes in, and attitude adjustment, getting people to take responsibility for themselves, getting governments to shift some of the programs, the engagement by the workforce. So there's still going to be jobs that can be repetitive. We can have the bank tellers go work in healthcare. There'll be a transitionary change to go from banking to healthcare. So we don't need everybody to adapt. We just need a lot more to adapt. We need a higher percentage of our workforce to be able to do this. And quite frankly, if I even think about some of the people that we even have on the lines doing repetitive jobs, they have the ideas. I mean, a lot of our ideas in terms of automation come from the people on the line. There are a lot of people on the line that are grinding away doing the same job over and over and over again, that if we actually freed them up to do fresher thinking, they can actually step up and do more and take care of themselves. So we just need more of them doing it. We don't need all of them doing it, because not everybody is going to make that transition. But there'll be, in my view, enough jobs around as we go through this transition to fill. And it'll be bumps and turbulence and all that, because you just can't snap your fingers and adjust an economy. But without doubt, the fundamental underlying development of the middle class around the world, the massive progress we're making on pushing down poverty throughout the world, the massive progress we're making in terms of pushing down disease around the world, all this is scrap and waste, which is going away, which allows people to actually step up and try to realize their dreams more.
Can I just say something about education?
You can say whatever you want.
I think the education system generally is very antiquated. And education has to evolve, and it should be pretty much as simple as a Google search. You should be able to type, give me a PhD in math, and out comes all content that you need for doing that. And once we have that, we can adapt and we can train people easily. Now we're involved with that on the philanthropic side. I'm not going to go too much into that here, but one of the key issues here is the antiquity of the educational system.
Right, and so I think it's true that the education system needs to evolve, but I want to go back to something that Dave just said, which is, if you're a banker, maybe you need to go in healthcare. One of the things that I think about is like, your job is so close to your identity. The American identity is all about where you work. What's something that you think about a lot? Jeff, maybe you can talk a little bit about if we're going to be transitioning jobs so quickly, what does that mean for the American identity in terms of how we present in the world if people are changing not only occupations but maybe whole industries quite frequently in the future?
It's funny because I'm talking in a few weeks at Oxford, and one of the things I'm talking about is how defined the university makes you. So it says you're an engineer, therefore you go into these jobs. You're a lawyer. You're pre-law, therefore you get to be a lawyer, and that's your career. And how locked in it feels to that. I'm on the board of the Oxford Foundry, which is the startup group for Oxford, which is why I'm speaking there. And one of the most remarkable things about the teams we see there is, and we challenge them to do this, is to bring together different types and different groups of people. Right? So if you're an engineer, go find the philosopher. Right? If you're the English major, go find the designer, and try to come up with those different combinations of things that allow you to see the world from a different perspective. Not just to create a better team, which it does absolutely create a better team, but also to help you evolve your perspective of how the world works or your view of how things happen. And I think that that's really what's important when we think about people and how they develop going forward, is it's the combinations of things that are going to be incredibly important. In our firm, we nicknamed it Suits and Jeans. Clearly, I'm the jeans side. And this is about bringing together our 100 years of expertise in audit or tax or whatnot, which is magnificent and wonderful and a huge asset for us, but bring it together with perspectives from people from the outside who worked at some of the big internet companies and the big startups of the world, who just see the world differently. And by bringing those teams together, what I've seen, and it's tangible, this evolution of both sides, right? It's the recognition from the people who come in from the tech centers and say, wow, these folks who dress in these suits, I mean, they know so much about the world, and they know so much about how things work. And boy, that's really interesting. And the people who are coming from the traditional suits are saying, wait, our business could be completely different. And I see how I can be a part of changing it. So for us, it's really about trying to combine groups of people into teams that allow them to mix together and allow that organic nature of that conversation to allow them to see the world in different ways. And I think that's really what's creating a lot of this flexibility on my team, inside of the teams that look like mine inside of EY.
And Dave, how are you thinking about creating a flexible workforce in terms of these conversations that you're openly having with your employees at RBC?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's how we work and how we solve problems together. We used to work in very much a committee matrix structure and ran large projects, design products, design services, and policy in committee structure and multitasks. We went to an agile workforce probably about 3-4 years ago, where we really put teams together in rooms to solve problems. Everybody was a contributor. You just didn't come with your functional hat on or your product hat on or your distribution hat. You were ultimately responsible for the end product and the aspirational end state that we wanted. And you stayed together as a team in an agile way until you delivered. And what we found is that we unlocked the potential of our team. So many people come in with one hat on, whether it's a risk hat, a finance hat, a engineering hat, but they have experiences in other areas that you weren't leveraging. So getting an agile team together to solve problems for us was very different than we had worked. Now, there's a lot of startups, and I saw this at work at Facebook in the Valley and took it back and said, we got to start working like this. But the difference is we have to be 99.999% right all the time. We cannot lose your money. We can't build a product that kind of works and we'll fix it, in real time. It's got to work. You can't lose people's money. But how we build it can change. And we've seen kind of a revolution in expanding agile throughout the firm and building products differently. And it stresses how we evaluate talent. It stresses how we align the organization. And that's all good because we have to work much quicker. The second thing is you got to build cultural change. I think Mike said it. It's a mindset in the organization to adapt. And we spent a lot of time going through a cultural change in the last 2 years. building a new leadership model, redefining what we're looking for from a leader in the organization. We have 80,000 employees. You have to lead through others. And what is it you're looking for in a leader? We redefine that. We redefine the aspirational aspect of setting bigger goals, of enabling your team, because so many of our leaders are great problem solvers and they want to solve and make decisions all day, and they feel good when they go home instead of enabling others to create and stretch themselves. So it's all of that. It's a complex problem, but leadership, setting up the right infrastructure to solve problems and innovate in a company. And then the last thing I would say, I had to take innovation to the fringe of the organization. I tried all kinds of skunk works. And they got crushed inside. You can set people up and say, you've got a mandate, you've got to align to me, but if they don't have true control of what they're doing. So we started setting up labs at the fringe of the organization, physically removed from any other footprint that we had. Orlando, Florida, other parts of the US and Canada. And they had a line into myself. And I created the budget, and our greatest innovation, our largest number of patents, are coming out of some of these fringe labs where they got the freedom to challenge the model in a very different way, the resources to put the model into place as a challenger model, because in a big organization, too often these things get crushed. And as a CEO, that's what you have to nurture. You have to nurture the leaders and their ideas, and I think every organization should have some of that at the very fringe, and at the core, but you need it at the fringe.
Yeah. Igor, do you have any advice for the leaders in the room who are trying to do what we were just talking about with Dave in terms of navigating a world in transition, as they say here at MI Global?
Yes.
How do we do it?
So the modern world demands modern leadership and the modern management methods. And in our case, we adopted leadership methods from the military. We formed the Leadership Institute together with the McChrystal Group, Stan McChrystal, who captured Saddam Hussein and managed 160,000 people at some point in time. And from there on, we do all kinds of very interesting activities. We have a video conference every 2 weeks that has every single employee of the company online, and that creates what we call a shared consciousness, which answers the other question you were asking before, like how do you get people to go from one role to the other, to the other, to the other? It's by creating this shared sense of common purpose where people are helping the company as opposed to just being in some little box. So I think that's my answer.
Yeah. You something to add, Jeff?
Yeah, we did a snap poll out at MIT Tech, big tech conference out in Boston. It was interesting because we asked a question actually specifically about AI. And we said, how many companies, is your company experimenting or doing something with AI? And just broadly speaking, 70% of the companies said, yeah, we're doing something with AI, either experimenting or doing something systematic. And my thought was, I really worry for the 30%. Like, I really worry about the 30%, and not specifically about AI and whether or not you're experimenting with AI, although it would be a concern. But it's more the way we've thought about it is how we've systematically rethought our organization around the fact that the world is moving so quickly. So I mentioned a litany of things we've done in talent, or Nancy and team have done in talent to help us modernize. Same thing with business models, same thing with governance, our risk, independence, legal teams, rethinking how those are done, how those are taken care of. And yes, thinking about the technology teams and how do we not restructure, but rethink the type of talent, who we have, what philosophy do they operate under, right? That when we think about organizations and how they need to be positioned for the future, that is not a AI problem or just a technology problem or a problem over there. It's a problem for all of us to systematically rethink how the organization runs. The fact is that change has always, I think you've heard this theme through this panel, change has always been a part of business. I mean, that's just not new, right? Change has been, everybody in this room has been through change, right? That's, the difference between now and before is the pace. It's just happening so quickly, right? That you have to create an organization that can match that pace. And that's why innovation, we talked about, I have my own separate physical space for my team. I also have teams embedded in the service lines too, right? So we do the mix and match. We have to do both. And we work on every part of the business. It's not just, hey, we came in, build this neat tool, now we went away. We have to work on how does the business model work associated with that? How does that change? How does it evolve with us? So that's what I would say. If you're not looking at this systematically yet, that would be my suggestion, is start looking at all your business and ask yourself, am I moving at the speed of the world outside, or I'm just moving at the speed that, that has been created by my company? All of us, I think, would agree we have to move at the pace of the world around us.
I think also when we think about automation, we tend to focus a lot on the individual, did it displace a job or not? And we're not thinking about the system effects associated with building more and more automation into a system. And what I mean by that, I think, is something as simply as not having to wait in line and going to the bank and going to the teller. You just now have all that efficiency back in your system that is just affecting the workforce that touches it. Or when you walk in and get an airline ticket now, I mean, it is so fast and efficient. It's actually creating efficiency. I mean, forget the fact that you displace the teller at the airline. You actually are creating efficiency for all of society. And, closer to home in manufacturing or in our system, we're launching an automation company this week where we're taking all the automation assets of a flex, we're putting it alongside of the know-how and the money raising of a venture capital company, real hot venture capital company called Eclipse in Silicon Valley, and we're creating a full stack automation system. And what that means is instead of just doing automation to replace a person, you're actually doing automation, you're doing software, you're doing artificial intelligence, and you're actually managing the manufacturing process. And it's only having a full system in an intelligent world, in an intelligent age where you have availability with sensors and low-cost data and all that, you can actually manage the system. So now you don't put in automation just to manage productivity of two people and replace it with the machines. You're actually doing the system. And when you do the system, you do predictability, you set the pace, you have higher quality. And now when you build something, it's a more predictable output that's going into society, less likely for it to fail because you may have automated it. But when you now put it into a full stack automated system solution, you now as a manufacturer manage the performance of the system. You actually have to be responsible for the output. You don't just sell a robot and then back off. You actually are responsible for the system. And that's going to translate into people getting more reliable products. Now you don't have the scrap. You don't have to send it back to the manufacturer. You don't have to go down to the Apple store and get something fixed. All of a sudden you have a more efficient society. So I think automation is not only a consideration for just the individual displacement of the worker. We actually have to think about the peripheral benefits of that whole automation system and applying new technology on the back of it, like artificial intelligence, and what value it can create as a result of using those techniques. And it's actually quite high.
I'm going to open it up for questions in the audience in just a moment here, so I hope everyone is ready with something compelling. Dave, before I do you have any advice for the leaders in the audience who maybe also have workers who are feeling the anxiety about the future that you talk about, or perhaps are getting anxious themselves, like journalists like me? Is that going to be a job in the future? I mean, do you have advice for that?
We just keep talking about our frontline branch staff. So we sat down with them a year ago, and we talked them through the future very openly. Communication. And we said, this is where the journey of a frontline service role is. These transactions are all migrating to the phone. Therefore, this is where we see a frontline customer interaction role going in the future. And here's the types of skills that are required to be exceptional at that role. And here's the types of programs and training that's available to get yourself ready. There's some technical requirements around mutual funds and other products. There's certainly an aptitude to interact with a client in a different way on the sales side and support side and problem solving side. So that journey we created anxiety on day one. We saw our employees' EOS results decline in the first 6 months after we had those conversations because they weren't ready for it. And then the EOS started to build up as employees started taking control of their future. And I think the key message is change is not a threat when you have control. It's when you don't feel you have control. So you have to empower your team and make them feel that they're in control of that journey, control their future. It diminishes the anxiety significantly. And that's how we're seeing the manifestation of populism and anxiety. It's the lack of control over the future. So communicate, show the journey. It can be a tough conversation, as we experienced, but then you're empowering your employees to take ownership, as you mentioned, Mike, so important, of that journey.
Great. Any questions from the audience? I have one over here. Let's stick to if you could say who you are, and if we stick to the one sentence.
Serena Rosso is my name, from Australia. I just want to congratulate you. For the last 38 years, I've been doing education, training, and job creation. I'm fascinated by every member of the panel. But my question to you is diversity. We have something like 50,000 job seekers at any one given time, where we're taking them off welfare, and also we have disability. We're learning today that diversity is the norm. So can you please give us some understanding on how you prepare 50,000 job seekers with diversity, refugees, drug-related, mental health, non-speaking, long-term unemployed. I mean, it's very much the norm to prepare someone who has no barriers. But how do we deal with the minority who really become integrated with the world and accepted? Thank you.
Great question. Who wants to tackle that one?
Well, one thing I can say is we probably handle more people that come out of poverty and move into a middle class than many companies in the world. And I actually think we bring about 100,000 people a year out of poverty into the middle class. Now, they're not all disadvantaged. They're disadvantaged economically and by opportunity. But very often the first job are people to come into the manufacturing system. When we bring them in, we do about 2,000 training hours, 2 million training hours a year. We train them how to use a computer, how to work in teams, how to interact in society. We give them an opportunity to work in factories which are near cities that allow them to then really experience life in many cases, which includes understanding what they really want to be. Maybe they want to be bankers, maybe they want to work in retail, maybe they want to do a lot of different things. But our training hours are actually built on actually making them part of the middle class. And it's a huge opportunity. And then very often they work through manufacturing for a couple of years, and then they go into other jobs of more of their dreams. In virtually every large operation we have handicap lines, and we try to bring on as many people as we can that are disadvantaged. So we have a lot of different social programs associated with it. But we kind of view it, when we hire as many people as we have, 200,000 people, we actually ourselves make a difference in society. We actually impact. If we can bring 100,000 people a year into the middle class from poverty, that's like real impact. I mean, it's actually a meaningful number. And so we take that part of our job very responsibly. We invest in it. We take pride in it. And as they move into different things, as they move along their journey, we're happy to support them. And at the same time, we will work handicap lines and those kind of things.
What we found is internships and co-op is the great democratizer. You don't need to know someone to get the job at RBC. We've seen that with new immigrants coming into the country. Setting up a co-op program gets them that first job, then you get to test cultural fit with the organization, you get to test skills, you build a reputation. And co-ops and internships is a safe way to break the stigma, the potential stigma that some of these individuals may carry, whether it was crime or drug-related, and it's well known. So bring them in, give them an opportunity to prove themselves, test cultural fit. It really is a great democratizer.
Can I take a slightly different take on the diversity question? So I think too often we see, and we've probably all been in these rooms, where the leadership of whatever entity, group, company takes on diversity because they think they have to hit a certain number, right? It's a certain percentage of a certain type of person in the room. And I think in a way we take on a really different sort of philosophical understanding of it, because we actually done the math on this. Like, diverse teams deliver better answers. So for us, diversity is about a business imperative, because that's what we care about, is delivering the best answer to our customer, to our clients. And so that's one thing. I just sort of a broader comment on diversity. I hope that everybody in this room, and I imagine the majority do, think about diversity not as like, good, I can take a nice picture and like I can put that up in my marketing brochure, which is fine, I guess, but which is, I guess, a part of it, but it really takes it on because you will deliver a better answer. You will have a better organization because of it. And then just to tell a nice story back on topic on refugees, this is a point story, but sort of speaks to the culture of our team. We had a Syrian refugee who showed up at Germany, because some of them were coming into Germany, and he went on TV, just a young kid, 20-something kid, went on TV and said, "Why are you doing this?" And he said, "It's because I want to work at EY." No relation, he didn't know anybody there. Our staff members in our German office saw this on TV, went out and found him amongst the masses, interviewed him, he was qualified, and he's now a member of our team out in Germany.
Wow.
And so this is sort of the individual cultural nature, the culture that drives our philosophy around it. It's a nice story. We can't do it every time, but
Right.
we try to when we can.
And a shameless plug for those who want to talk more about migrants and refugees. I'm moderating a panel at 2:30 today about that very topic. Any other questions from the audience?
I got the part. Nina Reese with the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools. You touched on this a little bit, but could you talk more specifically about the topics that you wish the K-12 system was teaching our students today to better prepare them for tomorrow? Is it computer science? Is it coding? Is it more liberal arts approach?
So I'll hit it just because I have 12-year-olds, so I'm probably in the middle of this right now. For me, it's actually less important about the specifics. Like some kids are interested in coding, some aren't. Some kids are English, some aren't. It's really about analysis. It's sort of understanding English. Like reading Shakespeare isn't just about reading Shakespeare because it's an interesting story. It's about being able to break down a story and understand its component pieces and its characters as moving parts, because it's always good to be able to break down, when you read things, to break down things into their component parts and understand it. And then it's the ability to writing a story is about telling a story. And everybody in this room, when they go into the different environments, has to tell a story. That's what you're doing. You're telling a story about your company, and that's how you sell your company, sell your firm, hire employees. So for me, what I'm really interested in are how do schools help kids understand that when they're doing English, it's not about English. When they're doing math, it's not about just math. It's about being able to break problems down to their component pieces and put them back together. And then what I think is really interesting, and fortunately my daughter's schools have this, is how do they combine that consistently? Like how do you bring these different things together so that they can see that this is combined to deal with complex problems in environments that are ever changing?
I think the other thing too is not just in terms of training people's mind at more intellectual analysis of the content itself, but also general how to operate a computer, how to run machinery, how to diagnose problems that occur in machinery, understand things like power, how something runs, the functions of electrical system. I think there's a really lot of jobs that are good paying. If I think about even automation, that you don't need to have a college education. Not everybody's going to have a college education. Not everybody's going to have the opportunity or the intellect or the money or a lot of different reasons. But they can get a real good job, to me, coming out of high school. But they need to be trained at more than just English. They need to know how to actually operate systems in the world, whether they be electrical systems like computers or mechanical systems. I think that would be also really helpful to have as a core curriculum.
I would say 3 C's: communication, collaboration, critical thinking. I mean, those are the skills that are going to keep the next generation relevant to and flexible and agile in solving problems and interacting with the world as it changes.
Great. I think we have time for one more, maybe in the back.
Hi, my name is Kathleen McKay from Morgan Stanley. Thank you to the panelists. Igor, I'm interested in asking you about something you said about creating a shared consciousness and sense of purpose among your team. 2-part question. When you have that weekly video conference call with the full firm, what's the content? How do you do that in a way that people walk away feeling like they've gotten more about that sense of purpose? And 2, how might you adapt that kind of approach if you were running an organization of 50,000 or 100,000 employees?
Yeah, so first of all, we don't just let people speak randomly. We have a it's choreographed, and we have a schedule, and we discuss certain topics, and then we give people opportunity to to speak and to voice their opinion. I think actually this method scales very nicely, and it would work just as well for a company of 50,000 people. Now, a smaller percentage of people would get to say, to say what they think, but I think the general feeling and the general atmosphere of being together that it produces would work for a larger firm as well, and it would be extremely effective without really too much need to modify it. But it has to be scripted, it has to be thought out.
We have time for one more quick question over here.
Hi, I'm Jeff Magincola, the CEO of Coursera. And Teach for America often says, you can't expect a child to learn until they say two things. I want to and I can. I'm interested to hear what you've learned about how to provide incentives for people to want to learn and to how to provide the support so that they can.
You've clearly stumped the panel.
I think there's a natural incentive out there. I mean, this is the livelihood and prosperity of your family and as an individual, and you want to take control of your journey. And so I see so many employees, wanting to take control of their journey and activating that. So I think there's a natural survival incentive to be employed and to be gainfully employed and to evolve and not be left behind. So I don't see a complacency among employees saying, I'll be okay, I'm not gonna worry about this. There's angst and worry, which is, I think, the first sign of engagement in the future.
So I would agree with that. At least for our team's incentive, I don't know if we need the extra incentive. Although, like what I mentioned with our badges program, it's something that can be visible. They can put it on their LinkedIn profile. They carry it with them beyond. So I suppose that acts as a bit of an incentive. I'll have to sort of relate on a specific story. We recently signed a deal, and I don't know how public it is, so I'm not going to say the name of a company. It's not Coursera, but it's similar to Coursera. And what we did was we actually signed the deal so that they could take any class they wanted. Right? So it wasn't, hey, you got to take the audit classes or the tax classes or the supply chain classes, because that's where your field is. We just said take anything you want. And on this particular platform, there's meditation classes. There's all sorts of different things. I remember when I told the team, oh yeah, and by the way, we signed this deal with this company, so in the coming month you'll get this login that you can. I just mentioned it at one of these types of Igor's type of monthly meetings. I got 20 questions. When is it available? Can we really take anything? Are you really paying for it? Do I have to pay anything for it? They were so excited about it. So I agree. I didn't see any need for an incentive, but I do see when we do things like this, they love it. Yeah. They really want it.
One final comment.
Yep.
So I would just say one final thing too. We have to build into our children, into the DNA. Don't wait for the government to decide how you're going to get trained. Don't wait for the education system. Don't wait for the institutions. I mean, who's going to retrain our people? Is it going to be government? Is it going to be institutions? Hey, how about yourself? I mean, how about building DNA into our people that they understand what is coming at them in the world? We don't know what the world's going to be like in 20 years. None of us, even Jeff.
Great.
And we gotta be able to instill that DNA into our kids and let them take responsibility for who they are and who they become.
All right, on that note, we don't know what the future holds, but there's another panel in the immediate future for all of you. So I want to thank my panelists for a great discussion. Thank you so much.